Well, we haven't talked tonight about China. China's complicated, in particular, because of the Bidens, and that is not going to go away. Hunter Biden's role. So, can you talk a little bit about where those two things? One, let's just talk about strictly political red lines. But if you could talk a little bit about how the family dynamic and the fact that we know that there's an investigation going on, does that matter?
Oh, I don't think it matters that much. I mean, I think I devote a whole chapter to China, actually to the South China Sea,
I know.
which I think, frankly, is the single most important part of the whole China equation in terms of diplomacy, strategy, and the history of wars. It might still happen, my subtitle. But I think that the South China Sea is going to be absolutely critical in the future going forward, because I think this is where China is going to try to really make its mark with a blue water navy. And it has really been doing its best to assemble a blue water navy. It's not there yet, but it's getting very close. And I had some help from some very great experts from the U.S. Naval War College who have testified actually before Congress in testimony that nobody really paid very much attention to. I watched this testimony. It was just shocking. I mean, and then you go back and actually talk to them, and it's gotten worse since then. So, I think the how fast and how far China can go in order to really solidify its hold over the South China Sea and then build out from there, because it already is building out from there. It's already starting to establish, they call it the string of pearls, which is Chinese bases around the core of the Indian Ocean, around the periphery of the Indian Ocean. And they're doing it in some of the most insidious fashion. I mean, they go in and they loan these governments, like one was Sri Lanka, and then another one was Djibouti and whatever. They loan them huge amounts of money, which they can't pay back. And they say, well, instead of that, why don't you just let us put up a naval base on your periphery? And they say, oh, sure, go ahead, right. You wipe about a debt? Oh, yeah, we wipe about the debt, sure.
It's kind of the Jeffrey Epstein of foreign policy.
That's very good. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So
but here's the thing. Okay. Who would stand in the way? Would the Biden administration see that as a red line?
I hope it does. I can't imagine why it shouldn't. But the question then becomes is how you respond to that. And that is a real conundrum. I'm not sure that anybody has really figured out how to, really confront the Chinese on that. They've tried, and they, even the Trump administration has sent squadrons of planes, flyovers over these Chinese islands, and they keep getting warned away and whatever, and they keep on coming back, and they keep getting warned away and so on. There was one point, it was very funny. Trump actually gave an interview to Maria Bartiromo, and he said, there is a U.S. Navy strike force, a carrier strike force that's headed straight for the South China Sea right now. And well, in fact, it was actually steaming at that moment towards Australia, where we're going to have give their guys home leave and have an exercise with the Australian Navy. So hopefully there will be some more rational, person in charge who understands what you need to do to threaten people and how those threats might work. Those kind of threats don't work and never have.
So a few weeks ago, I had the honor of interviewing Samantha Power. And before I did that, I called up Frank Langfitt, who was a China correspondent for a long time. And he said, here's the thing that you have to ask all these people from the Obama administration. And I preface what I just said because this is really what we're talking about. We're talking about, Jake Sullivan, and we're talking about, all these people who are now in positions of power. They got China wrong, he said. They didn't see who Xi was. And you really need to ask all of them, if they could go back in time, would they have changed the way they dealt with the Chinese then? And have they taken on board that essentially Trump was not wrong about the way that he saw the Chinese? And I wondered if there was anything that you thought that he gets wrong in that analysis.
No, I think he's probably exactly right, except for one problem. I think it wouldn't have mattered whether we understood Xi back then, because, what he became very quickly was clearly a person unlike anybody since Mao. And he's now, like Mao was, president for life. And which is something, by the way, I think Trump would have really deeply envied, which is one of the
I thought
reasons.
that's what he was trying to do.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, so I think that, but I'm not sure that getting Xi early would have changed really anything. They were bound to, they have had over the last 10 years, especially, and certainly over the last 5 years, a very clear fixation on what they need to do and how they need to get there. And that's what they're doing. They're building out their entire front yard as their front yard, their South China Sea. They are building a blue water navy. They are cementing their control of the interior provinces of Xinjiang and whatever, and the all of those areas by concentration camps and so forth. They are making sure that their border with India is thoroughly blocked up and secure. In fact, I have a very good friend, Mira Kamdar, who was she was a New York Times columnist for a long time. She's an India expert. She was born in India. And she was very upset with me that I didn't go in great length along on the Indian-Chinese border, which isn't an interesting red line. The problem is, of course, that that it's so peripheral kind of to it, and it's really not going to make a major effort in geopolitical issues. But nevertheless, I mean, there are all of these areas around, just like Putin is worried about all of his areas around in his near abroad. The Chinese are worried about that is effectively their near abroad, and they have to make sure that works too. We have to understand how to approach the Chinese when dealing with this, putting a hard line down on some of their more horrific, human rights issues, but at the same time, understanding that they have a goal that we have to, in some fashion, put a stake through the heart of without, causing them to lose face. We were talking about face, but or lose their ability, their felt ability to be seen as a major power. That is very, very important to them. And that's why I think they are so intent on the South China Sea, because they want to make sure that Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, all of these countries, Thailand, Cambodia, all of these countries around the South China Sea, that they understand that there is one, capo di
Big dog. There's one big dog.
That's it. And it's China.
And it's China. So we are 4 minutes away to the top of the hour. I'm going to say thank you, and also say that those who want to stay on the call and unmute your microphones.
But I want to say some thanks also. So
I know you do. I know you do. So sorry. I'm leaving time for that. That's the whole point of calling it at 4 minutes to. So I'm going to say thank you to you. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. I'm doing my polite bye-byes. That is the book, A Red Line in the Sand. There is also a podcast that you should tune into if you like this discussion. And thank you very much for all of you coming out on a Friday night. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, David, so that you can say your thank yous and open up the microphones. I'm going to have to leave at 7, but there are others who want to stay.
I have so many thank yous. First, of course, to Deborah Amos, the incomparable interlocutor and brilliant international correspondent. What would we do on NPR without her? And to OPC's executive director, Patricia Kranz, above all, to Chad Bouchard, without whose talents we would never have even gotten on the air. So thank you all. Thank you, Patricia. Michael Serrell, my successor as president of the Solarians Press Club, and Ian Williams, president of the Foreign Press Association, for getting the word out so magnificently. And then, of course, there's Jessica Case, my editor and publisher of Pegasus, my agent, Alexis Hurley at Inkwell Management. If any of you needs any agent, she is the one. And of course, my wife, Pamela Tyler, she's in the other room listening and watching.
See her.
Hello, Pamela. Without whom none of this would ever have been possible. Now, to borrow a phrase from Ed Murrow, good night and good luck. I couldn't resist that.
And tell them where the podcast will be.
Yes, the podcast was an evergreen podcast. It'll be on, it's called A Red Line in the Sand. And it will, the first episode pubbed on last Monday, and a new one will pub every Monday from now for the next 12 weeks to correspond to 12 different parts of the book. We have some actuality, some very interesting historical actuality and so on it.
But and where? Is it on Apple Podcasts? Is
on
it
Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on every kind of podcast platform you can have. If you watch it on Apple Podcasts, please, please, please give me a 5-star review. And you'll hear me. I'm the narrator. So if you can stand that. But thank you. Thank you, Deb. You're amazing.
Okay. Thanks. So are you. Thanks, everybody.